All right. Hello, all you creative beings out there in the world. We are here today. My name is Dank P.H.A.R.T, the pirate poet. P.H.A.R.T is spelled P.H.A.R.T, stands for pretty hot and reasonably talented. You might be here with us tomorrow, but then it will be a today wherever you are. So welcome with us here today. Uh, I am doing an interview series for my project called Poem Peace on Earth Movement. It is a social media campaign called Peaceful Mother Lover Challenge. It is a challenge video where you make peace on Earth by drawing a peace sign on the earth, thus making peace on Earth.
Yeah,
Also intended for you to build some positive energy and just kind of take a moment to breathe and kind of get yourself centered with that ground and that space and connect us with that planet underneath us. And all of these interviews are with different individuals that have ideas, stories, concepts of how we can go from this little peace on earth symbol thing that can seem very impractical and kind of silly and foolish and like, ooh, he's just a bunch of weird hippie. But how we can take practical, grounded steps to create these new systems and design societies and cultures where all of us can thrive together. 'Cause, that's what we got to do.
that's
And
the mission.
yeah, I am here with Nico Joyce of One Boulder. Take it away, Nico.
Sure. Where do you want me to go with this?
I would just give us a rundown about what One Boulder is, and kind of maybe a little bit of how it kind of came to be.
For sure. Yeah, so my background was about a decade of living off grid and post capitalist, traveling the world, consulting and designing intentional communities. Had like a real spirit call when I was about 20, went to West Africa while I was in college. And then from there, it just kind of ran. I was over there and saw how dependent people were becoming on a global capitalist market, yet how well resourced they were in terms of the skills and knowledge and resources on the land, and really wanted to break down a lot of the narratives over there that like the Western world is so much more advanced and our streets are paved in gold, and that is sort of the shining light of how we want the future to be, and sort of reflect to the folks there just how beautiful their culture was to someone coming from a country that was, missing elders and missing music and arts happening every day on the corners and missing that real flow and buzz of being alive. There's something that comes with chopping wood and carrying water for real, and knowing how to be a humanimal on this planet.
I love that phrase.
So I had this vision, right, to start basically a Rastafarian revolution, help the artists and musicians move back to the land and not have to sell out or make their whole mission like either tourist traps or just different things that were being pushed by economic forces, and instead set up a base camp where we could do international trips, and sort of a farm and regenerative design school, while also teaching cross-cultural skills like Westerners learning art and music and dance there, and the local people being able to see how beautiful and powerful their culture was, even to these sort of like almost pedestalized Westerners, and really break down that wall and get real about what values we really held in our hearts and what really matters in this life. So I kind of had this ambitious idea, thought it was just a concept that I came up with from the universe, and then I found the word eco-village like probably about a year or so later, and suddenly was accessing networks of people that had thousands of locations and hundreds of thousands of people all over the planet through the global eco-village network. Eventually was on the board of that, and then I guess hit a point where a lot of my work was how do we help these singular pieces of land where people have moved to and sort of got their in-group and they're out on this land and they're doing the sustainable like whole systems lifestyle, regenerative lifestyle thing, but how do we actually bridge that back into the world as it is now? And so we would help different exchange programs happen, like inner city youth getting out onto a permaculture farm and that kind of thing was fun for a while. But that was always my edge, is how do we make this relevant to the masses? And I guess 2015, I got this invitation from life to go back into the heart of the city and to really crack these codes of money and power right where they're most prevalent and most challenging to overcome. It's kind of easy to live without money when you're actually in community and resourcing and growing a lot of your own food, and you built the housing so you don't have mortgages and overhead. But how do you actually crack those codes right in the belly of the beast? So went to Asheville 2015, was there till about 2017, and then came out here to Colorado after our experiment in Asheville, North Carolina, to carry forward a similar project here, and met my sort of crazy co-founder, Eric Lawyer, in 2017. And in the last 3 years, we've just been through this beautiful process of co-designing and weaving based on our experiences, mine, as I just shared, and his in the emergency response world. So really tactical, practical systems for operationalizing large groups of people on a common objective, even if they've never worked together before. So with those two sort of life seeds in the two of us coming together, we started to think about, what does a whole systems regenerative Boulder look like? Like, what would it actually look like to infuse the heart of Boulder and reactivate the sole purpose of the creative community here, and find a platform that they could thrive in by coming together. And from that, I guess, concept stage, we've hosted a lot of different gatherings, and then just really the beginning of 2020, it's got very practical, tangible legs that we started hosting a Sunday gathering. We work with a hybrid model, so basically looking at different containers to get the job done. So we have both a nonprofit 501c3, a for-profit corporation, and a 508c1a church. And so between these containers, a lot of different aspects of red tape and interfacing with the world as it is, to be able to move it towards the more beautiful world. I think I feel called to, and a lot of us probably do, listening to this call, where we're supported to live our soul's purpose and not have to choose between struggle and sell out, but actually support each other to live well and thrive doing what we love. We came into the Riverside space right there, cat corner from Alfalfa's. A lot of people probably have seen that building. It's got the patio on Boulder Creek.
And if you're not familiar, you're not out in Boulder, it's like right downtown Boulder, right on the creek in downtown Boulder. So if you're ever coming through Boulder, check out the Riverside.
Yeah, it's kind of, they joke that Boulder's this vortex, and that was certainly my experience. I just got pulled here real quick after I first came, and we feel like Riverside's kind of the vortex of Boulder. There's a really strong energy there right on the Boulder Creek that runs through the heart of this town. Like I said, it's one of the few places that's got an actual outdoor patio along the creek, right across from what we call Boulder's Central Park. And it's an events venue that has always wanted to become more of a community center, like a regenerative living center. Sort of like a co-op. I don't know if Denver crowd's listening, but sort of like a co-op on first in terms of concept. But then obviously the sort of avatar of Boulder is more of this entrepreneurial, maybe a little more cynical around the kumbaya crowd. And how do you really interface the important values of creative culture in a digestible format, sort of bridge that gap between the 5D and the 3D?
That's so beautiful. And I really like how with you creating the 508 and the 501(c)(3) and the for-profit, and putting out together all of the sectors to create the most fluid way to be able to to work with all the different organizations. It's like having, that's really, really brilliant. What was kind of some of the seeding behind that, and how does that relate to potentially how other ways and systems can work?
Hmm. Yeah. So the inspiration for having sort of the knowledge base of the containers comes from my partner, and he got a download. He was a firefighter, helped with a lot of memorial services after 9/11, and got a vision on the 10th year anniversary of 9/11 to do a big event to celebrate the transition from fear to love. And they ended up, getting space right under the Space Needle in Seattle and at a stadium in Seattle, and they did it in like 3 months. They made about a 50,000 person event. They pulled it out of the hat. Major work of spirit. Like every production company he called that had experience was like, "You're crazy. That's never going to work." And then it all just lined up. And a big part of it was that he had these different containers in place. So, for example, the stadium, you know, didn't had like an exorbitant price if you were going to rent it as a business. But if you were a nonprofit, they had some, sponsorship programs to offer the space. So they got the stadium that way. And then like there's a bunch of red tape for the land under the Space Needle. And they tried the for-profit, they tried the nonprofit, and then they tried the church. And that was the one that opened that door. So they sort of saw that this array of containers could sort of serve as a key in all of these different sort of red tape areas, like permitting or pricing of venues, depending on how they framed what they were doing. And not in a manipulative way, but just in a way of saying, hey, okay, you want us to check these boxes? Well, great, like we can do that, and it's totally part of the core ethos that all of these containers are in service to, so no problem. And we've been finding similar sort of silver linings, especially at this really interesting time of sort of the world being shut down.
Yeah. And I feel like so many of our issues in our world come from all these sectors that aren't working together and creating all of these places where they aren't able to collaborate when they're really, it's all just kind of structural in our imagination, these structures that we've created that just inhibit us from working together. And I feel like that is where a lot of our systems start to fall apart. And from what I understand, that's kind of what one boulders kind of, and the one core kind of is really what all about, is trying to figure out how all these sectors can start to kind of work together and collaborate and have information flowing fluidly around again so that they can all kind of thrive together.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of that inspiration is coming out of the emergency response world. They call it the incident command system, but it's, like Hurricane Katrina or whatever natural disaster happens. You got the Red Cross down there, and you got, maybe FEMA down there, and you got the local PD and the local fire department. And how do all these groups come together? In about the 70s, they started to work on a system for soft patterning. So rather than destroying the local culture, and it has gone in that direction because most things seem to get centralized and hijacked in this world, as it has been. Maybe we're marking a new transition here. But it worked very well to basically say, let the local fire department develop their own culture, but let them have a common language, let them have a protocol set that they can interoperate. And so we're basically looking at that and instilling, like we added 2 departments. One's like training and development, so we can really work with the people, and the other one's community and spirit. And these are sort of like the more 5D branches off of the 3D incident command system that's like, planning, logistics, operations, and finance. And so you add in the development of people, and then also just the community care and cultivation of spirit. And now we're looking at something that feels more like that bridge between the 5D and the 3D.
Yeah. And the 3D is kind of like this very physical world, and the 5D is more of the higher, more almost ethereal realm. And it's about how to kind of combine the two together.
Exactly. Yeah. So even we spent most of this year just cultivating the spirit side, seeing who was drawn to these containers that were literally just 2 hours. We called it a presencing council. And the idea was, a friend of mine at MIT started this body of work called the Presencing Institute. His name's Otto Scharmer, and it's the concept of basically just like what happens when we're radically present, and then also sensing into what is drawing us into the future, and like what is it that's emergent here. And so he wrote a book called Leading from the Emerging Future, to sort of say, hey, as the world changes increasingly quickly, what's actually going to be more relevant than the ability to sort of focus on the past and learn from what didn't work and then let that dictate your behavior moving forward. There's like, if you can actually integrate those experiences, let yourself be present here now, and then like listen for truly disruptive innovation, truly enlightened disruption, then you have like phase changes instead of just like step-by-step changes. And I think that's always been one of the challenges of centralized systems and bureaucracy. They just can't transition or upgrade or evolve like the grassroots and rapid prototyping and iteration can.
Yeah, 100%. And then when we create that grassroots prototyping and we can connect it to our modern networks, all of a sudden we can just blow that model up so fast and so quickly, and it helps integrate, and it also will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because within it there will be an economic aspect of it, so that it will start to create the seed fund for itself.
Exactly. And sort of that's the transition of money that you're describing that often breaks down, even in the nonprofit sector. It's like, even if we're both working on, maternal rights, we're operating in silos and we're competing for the same grant funding. And then the for-profit world is obviously in economic competition, is trying to get their project forward. And then we have intellectual property. So like, you can't even actually get the best of anything because company X owns this component and company Y owns that component, and it's illegal to have something that has both of those components installed in it. So one step is having a way that we're sharing resources and assets, like we call it the mother fund. So there's this centralized fund. It's basically an endowment that's able to support multiple people. This is in development, obviously, but I think getting fast tracked as we watch this very interesting financial really transition happening right now. Like, you look at the 2008 crisis, the recession there, and all the money went from the Fed directly to the big banks. And now there's something different happening where a lot of the stimulus money is actually being earmarked for small businesses, even the self-employed, even sole proprietors, and businesses under 500 employees. It's a real different game we're playing. It's almost like we're dipping our toes in the concept of a universal basic income, like what Andrew Yang was cheerleading is almost happening with these stimulus checks. Obviously it's a stretch and it's coming from a very different place, but
they've definitely put that word out there in some of the articles straight from the government.
Yeah, in effect, that's what's happening, is we're all being handed a check. And that's a very novel concept that would have seemed impossible, or very fringy, maybe even 5D just a couple of weeks ago. And now it's happening. And so that's kind of the money piece. And then one of the things about networking, the Global Eco Village Network, the board I was on, or the Foundation for Intentional Community, another board I was on, a lot of networking is happening at a relational level. So it's like we kind of come together, we got similar interests, like let's have a retreat or an event and sort of all get to meet and have fun and connect. But then we kind of go home and we're in our nonprofit or our for-profit, and it's like, oh, but now I'm just at my desk. And the work of really partnering with another organization takes a lot to, upskill, to know how each other's systems work. And that's once you've already passed the relational like trust level. So with the UCS system, the idea is that there's a language that world-changing, world-bridging, social impact organizations are going to be offered this language in a way that makes it more accessible to them than, hey, let's learn the emergency response language. It's like, hey, we've got a trained team who can come in and support you in landing your vision is the eventual goal. Right now, it's in seed stage and just developing those teams and developing the Riverside as a base of operations.
Yeah, totally. Kind of what you were talking about reminds me of how cells communicate and pass information. It's because they have a similar language, and like would be, it's for them it would be like coding within probably chemical coding or whatever that is the language that they're using. But you're talking about creating obviously verbal language, whatever that or what however it works, but so that these what were once kind of individual cells can start to communicate and share and exchange information for them both to thrive and collaborate.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So like, for example, of one of these components of a language, like we do something every meeting that we start, we do the ABCI. And what that stands for is alignment. So coming into connection with each other. Then we do a breath to drop into a state of coherence. And then the C is for a check-in to sort of share anything that needs to be known in order to drop into the I, which is the intention. And so that's just a way that we name what kind of universally happens in most meetings, just in a more or less organized way. But as soon as you name it as a pattern, now when I walk into groups, even ones I've never been in before, that I have this like, oh, ABCI, I can sort of watch how this group is coming into alignment, being together, checking in, and then like executing on an intention or an agenda. And just that framework, takes it from walking into a room and being like disoriented to like, okay, like we're incrementally checking these boxes. And so far in the last 3 years, every meeting I've been in covers them in their own way.
Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. I think a lot of our meetings, even like in this the current world structure, has its own form of that. They just are not quite cognizant of it. But yeah,
Right.
there's always this aspect of coming into the room, meeting people, and then kind of settling in, and then kind of figuring out where to move forward from that.
Exactly. Yeah. And as soon as you give it a name or track it, just bring it from the sort of implicit into the explicit. Now we can interoperate much more effectively.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, so what are some of the things that are really coming into fruition at the Riverside, and how does that relate to Boulder at large?
Yeah. One of the things that we stand with is the concept of moving slow to move fast, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so in this kind of bridging the spiritual and the practical action, one of the things we've really been cultivating is that it comes from a place that's non-reactive, that actually comes from a place that's a collective coherent response. So we've been really tested in that. Like I said, we were doing these just emergence services, these presencing councils every Sunday since the new year, and then suddenly COVID hit. And a lot of these concepts and almost like convincing of the importance and relevancy of like local regenerative culture is now like right in everyone's face. And if you're offering a solution, now is a really good time to set some patterns that, will persist even if we return to a little bit more of the world as usual. There's like this gap of time. So we've really been using that to look at what are some of the foundational things we can do to really set systems that will serve us into the future. So where that started is with food. And what does it look like to vertically integrate and hyper localize a food system? So right now we've got about 5,000 starts that we just seeded and got in, on the shelves and under the lights in a corner commercial location of Boulder. So we're both going to be selling some of those starts, but really the majority of them are going out to home gardens of members of our collective. And from there, they sort of get the produce that they want for their household and their family. And then the rest comes back to the Riverside, where we also have a commercial kitchen. And we start to weave that produce into meal programs that we just launched about 2 weeks ago. So we're doing home delivery of meal programs. Everything's, organic and increasingly locally sourced for $10 a meal. So it's like a full meal, meat or veggie. We're doing it batch cooking so that our chefs can actually use the produce that's coming in, rather than menu where you're like, well, I want exactly this. And you have to really, force and look for outside supply chains. We're saying what happens when we as a community just take the food that we're growing here, give it to chefs that can basically make anything taste good, and really use that surplus in a way that gets it right on someone's table. And I feel like currently the best alternative to that is like you get a CSA box and you got like 1 million radishes and you're like, what the hell do I do with these? So we're basically taking that overstock and giving it to chefs who actually know what to do with 1,000 radishes, and then cooking those meals at a really low cost. So that's one of the projects. With that, we're also doing a line of elixirs. So one's like a vitamin C booster, one's like a dragon shot. So, like they're all probiotic, ACV, apple cider vinegar based, but to really help people build their immune systems right now. And working on the full scale operationalization. Wow, that's a big word.
It's a great word.
It's like I'm still missing a syllable. Of the Riverside as a space. So we're moving now into conversations around membership and like a Monday through Friday events schedule, as well as a co-working space that's modular and rotating. So like a lot of design principles. So you're not just in there at your own desk, but you're actually a mobile co-worker, and then setting up different zones that have different sort of directions of collaboration.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
I'm ready for that, whenever we're off state mandated house arrest or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wild time. I feel like this is what we were made for, though. Kind of where you see Boulder going, and how that, so Boulder One, Boulder One is at, and how that will grow into one core beyond Boulder One.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we've found, everyone who's being attracted to this also feels like they were attracted to Boulder for a reason, or if they're, we have a few people who grew up here, they've very much stayed here for a reason. And there's sort of this palpable call of this place that feels like it's both small enough and innovative enough to make a global statement. And so our vision is to say, hey, with this central building in Boulder, if we can turn it into an example of a thriving, like regenerative urban base, how while documenting the process, and we can actually start to spread that to other cities. And Boulder just already feels like this city that's pioneering and innovating in a lot of ways, and a lot of eyes are paying attention here. So if we can actually, and it's kind of conveniently located there, like between the hill and a lot of like college energy, and then sort of coming down into the more business area. And so there's a lot of anchor institutions here in Boulder that make it a really interesting place for sort of a like trans demographic movement of college students giving time, and businesses that they can walk into in the future. One of the design concepts of One Core, which is the action branch, sort of the unified service force of One Boulder, is to be an analog to the Peace Corps, where rather than deploying abroad and being there for a temporary amount of time, and it's sort of like this, step out of time of your own life, you kind of go over there and serve and then come home, and you're kind of in the same spot you were at before you went over there. Like coming out of college, you got to figure out like what's next. And you're trying to design solutions for other cultures where you don't really have the knowledge base to be there just short term and like be super effective. So what we're saying is, what if there was a local alternative that was focused on regenerating the region, and the relationship and business connections that you were building during your service time were actually in the place where you wanted to be. So now you're resourced and networked and at home, part of a regenerative network with sort of a badge of of you're well trained and really able to be a powerful leader in whatever organization you choose to work with from there on out.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's what we need. We need to be fully resourced and empowered and able to really be educated in in the spaces that we are working within, and yeah, and ability to share those resources.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the phrases we use is being sourced, being resourced, and then being in service, and that there's actually this healthy balance to that, which is like, am I connected to myself before I'm trying to get, and instead I'm just here sourced and clear, and then the resources come, we connect with each other, and what we need starts to materialize, especially when we start to systematize it in ways that just make those flows more visible. And from there, we can really be in service. Whereas I think a lot of times, even in my own life, there's been so many times where I just feel that call to really like show up and serve, but I'm doing it in a way that's a little self-sacrificing. Like I stop paying attention to like me and like what I need and how I'm feeling as I'm doing this, really important work.
Yep.
And even in where we're at right now with One Boulder, I would say we're sort of in a resourcing phase. Like we were just having this conversation today where this gardens project that we've started feels really like inside out. It's like, well, our members are starting this garden project, whereas ultimately in the future, we want to be able to have organizations come to us and be able to support them, or individuals have a really like inspired, innovative idea and just need some help landing it, to be able to come to us for support. Right now, like we're really just landing, we're pretty sourced and it's moved into action, but that action still needs to be in a resourcing capacity to, build that mother fund we spoke about earlier, while having our businesses just inherently be regenerative so that they are serving the community even while they're resourcing us.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's totally on point. And like understanding the energy flows, and getting back in touch with that. I've always kind of felt that, so many times people with money, I've so been such an issue with it, is that they go, oh well, I need the resources, I need money, and then they just go like, well, how do I get money? Oh, I got to go get a job, instead of being like, okay, I need money. What if I develop skills that can be actively used in the world, and then I put together those actively skills, and then I serve with those skills, and
Yes.
then it will create the resources that you need to be for yourself and work. And so it's like, but for some reason our structures just really gotten us very confused as to the relationship of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure that makes it look a lot easier to either, that's what I was saying earlier about the struggle or sell out. It seems like finding that middle path that's just like sourcing my skills and knowing that my value and like my creativity, like cultivate that, will eventually draw the resources. It's like when we wake up to some of what's not working in the world, what we really need is some time to like both grieve that reality and like allow ourselves to feel and then cultivate our creative skills. And instead we're like thrown from, living with our parents into college, where we now suddenly have this huge debt, and then you get out and you got to pay off the debt, and like
Mm-hmm.
there's no built-in time to actually integrate and be like, okay, like I'm an awakening human being, I want to serve life with my creative capacity. And like, how do we create the spaciousness for people to actually, be with themselves through that process? And I think it's even more powerful when we can actually create a community that's with each other in that process and supporting people through that process, in that like really crucial time. And this is one of the things I really appreciate about you, brother. I feel like you've found a powerful and integrated way to just claim that you're in service to creativity, even though you have a kid, and like are really, anchoring through the 3D as well. There's a sense that there's this devotion in you to not sell out and
Yeah, I
must.
had I had good lessons. I had good teachers along the way in the journey. So I've definitely been super blessed, and I just always, and that's part of the thing is I've always like worked really hard, but I always knew I would rather be broke and like just barely scraping by financially than having a bunch of money working for something that just didn't feel right. Even though it's been, let's say, I don't want to say the word struggle because when I look back, I'm like, it was kind of, I just knew I had to do it, but it felt like a struggle within it. But also, like, when I look at the other side, it was just like, it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah, and if we can make that process a little bit easier, because it does take some grit. It takes some grit, gusto, and dedication to be a pioneer in that way, you know. And if we can just ease that path for people even a little bit, or even just show them more examples of people who have chosen to persevere through that and now are like thriving and super happy about the life choice that they've made, I feel like even just those stories really start to open eyes, you know, especially for like the college crowd here or even the high school crowd. Like, maybe there's an alternative to this linear, like 2.5 kids, white picket fence narrative that's collapsing rapidly and doesn't quite have a replacement yet.
Yeah, that's actually always been my kind of one of my goals is just to kind of like provide that example of being like, guys, like, look what we can do. And that's always kind of why the name Dank P.H.A.R.T. So it's obviously very jarring to some people. Like, so people like, I won't even say the name. I won't say the word fart. Dank P.H.A.R.T. No, no. That's kind of why I always held the name. Plus, it relates to cannabis. But was that if opens up a space and creates a path so that for you to like step into what you want to be or who you want to be without, you know, so creating that gap and being an example of people how to live in their own free self, you know, which is I think really what it's all about. How can we all, that's where like that source of joy and everything will come from, is when we are, our internal reality is matching it is working in a way that isn't feeling like it's being coerced into certain realities, which is, you know, yeah, it's that can be fickle in various different ways. But you know, how do we setting up a society for us all to thrive and giving us the space and the opportunity to really discover what we want to be doing and how we want to be of in service to the world instead of the world being like, nope, this is the manufacturing line, and you're going here, and you get to go to these 3 different possibilities, and here's
Those
your
are the only
briefcase or
ones.
whatever. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a beautiful, like, you know, statement. Just ultimately, the ultimate service is to just be really deeply connected to yourself and your freedom, and to be able to embody, you know, there's the whole like sovereignty movement, but in my eyes that's still very aggressive. It's still very much pushing against. And so we have this term we came up with, it's just called soft sovereignty. So how deeply do I need to integrate and release, you know, my fear and grieve the world as it is to come into a place of acceptance so I can meet the moment that really becomes more of a living invitation to other people to rise into that or connect to their deeper truth, rather than sort of like a sovereignty that's still almost in like the teenage rebellious phase. It's like
mhm.
pushing away. And I think even in my own life, that was a big part of what drew me back from, you know, off-grid, post-capitalist, eco-village designer to like, you know, urban hacker.
I love it. Life hacker,
Yeah.
systems hacker. That's beautiful, man. Do you have any final words for our viewers about One Boulder or One Core?
And yeah, I mean, as the world opens back up, we'll certainly be over at the Riverside. You'll see us selling green starts and maybe even planting some stuff on the roof of that building. So keep your eyes open. We'll be around, and probably putting out a like crowdfunder membership launch to really take this space to the next level.
Cool. And for anybody that's not local that might be here with us, what are some things about One Core that could potentially be interested in?
Yeah. So on Sundays, we also do a global connection service for our allies abroad. So if you want a link to that, you can also just go to, right now, I think it's core.1/explore-sign up, and I'll send you that link. But that's something that we offer, is just to bring people in, because this is really about charging that space of being sourced, and then letting the action really arise from that being together space, rather than pushed by some motive or agenda. It's just what wants to emerge between us. And I'm excited to see what things start to activate globally when we hold that space.
Beautiful. And that's every Sunday?
That's every Sunday. Yep. That's
Cool.
10 to noon Mountain Time if you're not local. And if you are local, we do one from 1 to 3. And make sure we get those links out, or just put my email there. It's probably the easiest, because we're doing all
Cool.
this back end building right now.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll have that all in the descriptions for all you wonderful, beautiful people out there. We have a beautiful world to create. Thank you so much, Nico, for being here with me. It's been a pleasure. Again, my name is Dank P.H.A.R.T, the pirate poet. P.H.A.R.T is spelled P.H.A.R.T, is an acronym for Pretty Hot and Reasonably Talented. We've been talking about one boulder and one core. This is an interview, part of an interview series for my project called the P.O.E.M, Peace on Earth Movement. It is a social media challenge campaign called the Mother Lover Challenge, where I teach you how to make peace on Earth by drawing a peace sign on the earth. Fill yourself up with some good intention and some good vibes, and seed that into the ground with peace on earth, with the peace sign on the earth. We all going to be making peace on earth, and then contribute $1, and 33% of that's going to go to 3 different organizations doing good positive work in the world. One of them is P.O.E.M, which is a nonprofit that does sustainable housing and permaculture education up on Pine Ridge Reservation, and it's an indigenous run for nonprofit. The other one is Veterans for Natural Rights, a veterans organization that is focused on bringing psychic healing to all vets. And then the third one is Bloom Network, which is a decentralized network helping collaborate and grow and connect all the different movements and communities within regenerative culture, and also creating a template for people to activate locally. Thank you all so much for being here. Get up on the Peaceful Mother Lover Challenge. Just all make peace on earth. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much, Nico.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you so much, and I wish you all the best. I love this visual imagery of making the peace sign on the earth. Way to like super 3Dify a super 5D concept.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm just like to be a vessel, Haha.